SFX. Slow, deep bass rumble. Rain against glass. Very faint whispering under the ambience. Narrator. These are not campfire tales. They are not urban myths passed from one mouth to another. Every story you are about to hear is true, told by the people who lived them and survived long enough to share the details. There are no happy endings here. No soft fade to black. Only the moments when ordinary nights turned into waking nightmares. Keep your lights on and your back to the wall. This is Real Terror Files. Thunder crack. Music drops into silence. Part 1. The Night Visitor, 101 to 6 o'clock. SFX. Creaking floorboards. Wind rattling a window. Narrator. She woke to the sound of movement. A slow, deliberate step across the hallway. Then another and another. She lived alone. At first, she told herself it was the upstairs neighbor. The sound of pipes. Anything that made sense. But the sound was inside her apartment, and it was coming closer. The doorknob turned just slightly, metal scraping against metal, and then the faint outline of a tall figure appeared in the doorway. He didn't speak, didn't move, just stood there, her eyes adjusted enough to see the faint reflection of light in his eyes, watching her, studying her, and then, just as silently as he'd come, he stepped backward into the dark hallway. She heard no door open, no window break. When the police arrived, they found every lock engaged from the inside. No sign of forced entry. No footprints. No evidence at all. But she still moved out the very next day. Part 2. The Passenger, 6:01 to 10 o'clock. SFX. Car engine idling. Street noises in the distance. Narrator. He was a rideshare driver, trying to hit his nightly quota. His last pickup request came from a quiet, dimly lit street. She appeared from the shadows, a young woman in a pale dress. She slid into the back seat, gave him an address, and stared out the window for the entire ride. The address was on the outskirts of the city, past industrial lots and empty warehouses. When they arrived, the house looked abandoned, windows boarded up, the yard overgrown with weeds. He turned to say they'd arrived. The back seat was empty. His phone still showed the trip as in progress, the passenger's name and smiling face frozen on the app. The next day, he mentioned it to another driver. The man's expression went pale. "You picked her up?" he asked quietly. "She was killed out there years ago." Part 3. The Dorm Room, 10:01 to 1400 hours. SFX. Faint scratching on glass. Distant laughter echoing. Narrator. She was studying late in her dorm room, headphones in, when she noticed movement outside her window. Her room was on the 4th floor. At first, she thought it was tree branches, but there were no trees that high. The scratching grew louder, more deliberate, like fingernails dragging across the glass. She stood and pulled the blinds. Nothing, just darkness. Hours later, she woke to a faint tapping sound. The blinds had been pushed open an inch. From outside, 2 pale hands rested against the glass. By the time she screamed, whatever was had vanished. Campus security searched the grounds and found no one, but they did find something else. Muddy footprints on the roof, leading directly to her window. Part 4. The Footprints, 14:01 to 1700 hours. SFX. Door latch clicking. Light footsteps. Narrator. A family woke in the early hours to find their front door wide open. The father grabbed a flashlight and scanned the living room. Everything was exactly as it had been. But when they looked closer, they saw them muddy footprints, leading from the door down the hallway to the side of their bed, and then back toward the door again. The police found no signs of forced entry. The family changed the locks the same day, but every so often, they wake to find the door open again. Outro, 17:01 to 1800 hours. SFX, low, sustained bass, whispering just under the mix. Narrator, the stories you've just heard are true. They happen to people who could have been your neighbors, your friends, your family. And if you think you're safe, remember this. The next sound you hear in the dark might not be your imagination. This has been Real Terror Files. Sleep well if you can. SFX. Distant thunder. Low rumbling hum. Narrator. The stories you're about to hear happened in real life. The names may be changed, but the events are exactly as they were told. Some will make you question your safety. Others may keep you awake tonight. Welcome to Real Terror Files. The man in the vents, 101 to 5 o'clock. SFX. Air duct rattling softly. Light metallic clinks. Narrator. She'd been hearing noises in her apartment for weeks. Scratching above her ceiling. Strange clattering in the vents. The landlord told her it was just old pipes. One night, she woke to the sound of breathing. Not from the hallway, from inside the air vent above her bed. She grabbed a flashlight and pointed it toward the vent slats. Two eyes stared back at her. When police arrived, they found a man living in the crawl space above her unit. A former tenant who had been secretly entering her apartment through the vent system at night. The voice on the baby monitor, 5:01 to 8 o'clock. SFX, static hum. Occasional faint child's giggle. Narrator. A young couple kept a baby monitor beside their bed, so they could hear their daughter at night. One evening, as they were drifting off to sleep, they heard a faint voice through the monitor. It wasn't their daughter. The voice was deep, whispering, "Don't worry, I'm watching her." The couple ran to the nursery. The crib was empty. Moments later, they found their daughter standing in the darkened hallway, staring toward the front door, which was wide open. The motel room, 8:01 to 12 o'clock. SFX, neon buzz. Distant traffic. Dripping faucet. Narrator. He was traveling alone and stopped at a roadside motel for the night. The room was stale, the air heavy, but it was cheap. Around midnight, he woke to the sound of scratching under the bed. Thinking it was a mouse, he got down on the floor to check. A man was lying there, pressed against the wall, eyes wide open, holding a kitchen knife. He bolted from the room and ran straight to the front desk. The clerk didn't seem surprised. "Yeah," he muttered. "This isn't the first time." The disappearing neighbor, 12:01 to 15:30. SFX. Footsteps on gravel. Soft wind. Narrator. She saw him every morning. The man next door who left for work at exactly 6:15. One day, she waved him as he backed out his driveway. His car vanished halfway down the street. She blinked, convinced she was seeing things. But when she asked another neighbor about him, the woman frowned. That house has been empty for years. The thing in the woods, 15:31 to 2000 hours. SFX. Crickets, rustling leaves, faint distant scream. Narrator. Two friends went hiking in the mountains and set up camp by nightfall. Around 2 a.m., they woke to footsteps circling their tent. They called out, no answer. The steps grew faster, erratic, almost animal-like, until they stopped. In the silence, something leaned against the tent wall from outside, pressing a face-shaped bulge toward them. They grabbed a flashlight, but when they shined it, the shape vanished. In the morning, they found no footprints. Only a single handprint on the tent wall, twice the size of a human hand. The return call, 20:01 to 2400 hours. SFX. O-phone ringing. Click. Narrator. He was closing up at work when the store phone rang. A woman's voice whispered, "Help me, he's coming." Then the line went dead. Minutes later, his phone rang again. Same voice, same words. But this time, he heard something in the background, his own voice. The call was coming from the store security office, down the hall. When he checked, the room was empty. The phone was still off the hook, and the air was ice cold. Outro, 2400 hours 01 25:00. SFX, low, droning hum. Clock ticking. Narrator. These accounts are not legends. They are warnings. They prove that sometimes the shadows move, and sometimes they watch. SFX, slow, hollow knocking from below. Creaking wood. Narrator. He just moved into an old rental house, built in the early 1900s. The floorboards groaned with every step, but on his second night, he noticed something different. Around 1 a.m., a knock came from directly under his bed. 3 slow, Deliberate taps. He thought it was the pipes until it happened again, this time closer to where he was lying. The next morning, he pulled up a loose board in the corner of the room. Underneath was a narrow crawl space, and in the dirt, the clear impression of two pale hands pressed into soil, as if something had been trying to push its way up. The girl in the gas station bathroom. SFX, fluorescent light buzzing. Dripping tap. Narrator. She was driving cross-country when she stopped at a small-town gas station. The bathroom door was slightly ajar, and inside, a young girl stood facing the wall. She asked the girl if she was all right. No answer. When she turned to leave and get help, the bathroom door slammed shut. She forced it open seconds later, and the girl was gone. The clerk swore no one had gone into the bathroom in hours. But when she checked the mirror above the sink, she noticed something carved into the glass. I never leave. The shadow in the back seat. SFX. Rain on windshield. Windshield wipers swiping. Narrator. He was leaving work late, climbing into his car in the empty parking lot. As he started the engine, the rear view mirror caught something. A shape in the back seat. He spun around. Empty. Halfway home, he saw it again, this time a figure sitting upright, its head tilted toward him. By the time he reached his driveway, it was gone, but the seatbelt in the back was still buckled. The thing in the photo. SFX. Camera shutter click. Faint static crackle. Narrator. At a family gathering, they posed for a group photo in the living room. Everyone smiled. The picture was taken, but when they looked at the photo later, there was someone else in it. A tall, gaunt man stood in the corner of the room, dressed in clothes from decades ago, his eyes fixed directly on the camera. No one had seen him when the photo was taken, and when they compared it to an old family album, they found his face. He had died in that house in 1952. The park bench at 3 a.m. SFX. Crickets, faint breeze, faraway laughter. Narrator. He was walking home from a late shift when he saw an old man sitting on a park bench, staring straight ahead. He nodded a greeting. No reaction. As he walked past, he noticed a man's clothes were damp, as if he'd been caught in the rain. But it hadn't rained in weeks. The next morning, the police had the park taped off. A man had been found dead on that bench, at least 3 days earlier. The doorway smile. SFX. Soft wind. Low hum. Narrator. She woke to see her roommate standing in her bedroom doorway, smiling unnaturally wide. "Are you okay?" she whispered. Her roommate didn't answer. She just stood there, grinning, until she slowly stepped backward into the hallway. The next morning, she mentioned it over breakfast. Her roommate stared at her in confusion. "I wasn't home last night. This has been real terror files. Sleep well if you dare." SFX. Low, rhythmic breathing. Quiet creak of wood. Narrator. He lived in the apartment for a month when he started hearing it. Faint breathing coming from his closet at night. At first, he thought it was the wind through the vents, until the breathing changed pace, like someone trying not to be heard. One night, he opened the closet door quickly. Nothing. But in the morning, he found a footprint in the dust on the closet floor. Too large to be his own. The roadside hitchhiker. SFX. Car tires on wet road. Low rumble of thunder. Narrator. Driving home through a storm, she saw a man on the shoulder, drenched, with his thumb out. She pulled over, and he slid into the back seat without a word. After a few miles, she glanced in the mirror. He was gone. The seat was soaked, but there was no water on the car floor, and the doors had never opened. The basement TV. SFX. Static from an old TV. Faint children's laughter. Narrator. They didn't even own a television, but every few nights, they'd hear the faint sound of one coming from the basement. Old commercials, game shows, static. When they opened the basement door, the sound always stopped. One night, they went down to catch whoever was there. In the center of the room was an unplugged, dust-covered TV, switched on, showing only static. On the screen, for a split second, they saw themselves standing in the basement, staring at the screen. The hotel mirror. SFX. Dull hum of fluorescent light. Distant elevator bell. Narrator. On a business trip, he stayed in a small hotel downtown. The bathroom mirror had a strange, hollow sound when tapped. Curious, he shined a flashlight along the edges and saw another room on the other side, dimly lit. The next morning, he told the front desk clerk. The man just shook his head. That room was sealed years ago, he said. After an incident. SFX. Echo of footsteps in a large empty space. Narrator. She worked the closing shift at a 24-hour grocery store. After locking the doors at 1 a.m., she began restocking shelves. She heard the distinct sound of a shopping cart rolling down the next aisle. When she turned the corner, the aisle was empty, except for a cart slowly rolling to a stop on its own. A few items inside were decades out of date, their labels yellowed and faded. The upstairs neighbor. SFX. Muffled footsteps overhead. Faint dragging sound. Narrator. He always heard someone moving around in the apartment above his. One day, he asked the landlord about the upstairs neighbor. The landlord frowned. That unit's been empty since 2014. The ceiling's been sealed off for renovations. The hand under the pillow. SFX. Slow heartbeat. Faint rustling of sheets. Narrator. She woke in the middle of the night and felt something strange, a hand, cold and clammy, resting under her pillow. She froze. Her partner was out of town. When she finally pulled the pillow away, there was nothing there, but the indentation of fingers pressed into the mattress remained until morning. The attic light. SFX. Faint buzzing of an old bulb. Wooden creaks overhead. Narrator. He lived alone, but every night, the attic light clicked on around 2 a.m. He finally pulled down the ladder and climbed up to find it empty, except for a chair positioned directly under the light and a dusty glass of water beside it, still half full. The empty stroller. SFX. Wheels squeaking on pavement. Distant wind. Narrator. On an early morning jog, she passed a stroller parked by the side of the path. No one was around. She peeked inside. Empty. When she turned back moments later, the stroller was gone. The path was clear. Only the faint sound of squeaky wheels echoed in the distance. The face in the well. SFX. Dripping water. Hollow echo. Narrator. In a small rural town, a family discovered an old stone well behind their property. Late one night, they heard splashing and a voice calling faintly from below. When they shined a light into the well, a pale face stared back up at them, smiling. The next morning, they returned with help. The well was completely dry. The locked bathroom. SFX. Knocking on a wooden door. Water running. Narrator. She heard the shower running in the upstairs bathroom and assumed her husband was home early. When she tried to open the door, it was locked from the inside. Minutes later, the water stopped and the door swung open to an empty room. Her husband didn't arrive until hours later. The vanishing biker. SFX. Motorcycle engine revving. Wind rushing past. Narrator. Driving along a deserted highway at night, he noticed a motorcyclist in his rear view mirror. Tail light glowing red. The bike followed him for miles. Then, without turning off, without changing lanes, the light simply went out and the road behind him was empty. SFX. Heavy rain. Water rushing. Faint echoing voice. Narrator. Walking home in the rain, he passed a storm drain and heard someone calling his name. He crouched to listen. The voice was clearer now, soft and urgent. Come closer. When he looked inside, there was nothing but water and darkness. But the voice whispered one last time, from right behind him. The elevator passenger. SFX. Old elevator cables creaking. Dull ding. Narrator. Working late in an office building. She stepped into the elevator and hit the button for the lobby. The doors began to close, then stopped. A tall man stepped in without meeting her eyes. She noticed he wasn't wearing shoes. They rode in silence. When the doors opened, she stepped out. The man didn't follow. When she turned back, the elevator was empty, the doors closed, and the floor display showed it going down, below the basement level. The call from inside the house. SFX. Phone ringing. Static on the line. Narrator. Home alone, he got a call from an unknown number. A voice whispered, "I'm in your kitchen." He grabbed a knife and checked. Nothing. Moments later, another call. "I'm closer." He ran to the front door and stopped. The calls were coming from his own cell phone, sitting on the kitchen counter. The backyard swing. SFX. Chains creaking. Faint wind. Narrator. In the middle of the night, she heard the old metal swing in her backyard squeaking back and forth. When she looked outside, it was moving hard, as if someone had just leapt from it, but there was no wind. The next morning, she found footprints in the grass, leading straight toward her bedroom window. The man at the end of the bed. SFX. Slow breathing. Soft fabric rustle. Narrator. She woke suddenly, feeling a weight at the foot of her bed. In the faint moonlight, she saw a man sitting there, hunched forward, hands covering his face. She blinked, and he was gone. But the indentation where he had been sitting stayed in the mattress until morning. The door that never opened. SFX. Hollow knock. Low wind. Narrator. The abandoned building had one locked door in the basement. No one had the key. A guard swore he heard knocking from inside late one night. Slow, steady, patient. When they finally forced it open days later, the room was empty, except for a single chair facing the door. The dust around it was undisturbed, except for 2 fresh footprints.